Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build. Andrew, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me on, Adam. Been looking forward to this. Been a huge fan.
Absolutely.
Watching you for quite a while.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. That's awesome. Awesome to hear. And I'm also looking forward to hearing your story and sharing your story. Before we kick off, where are you calling in from? Where's home base for you?
Yeah, I'm in Fort Worth, Texas.
Awesome. Awesome. Great place. The growth, especially in built environment in Texas, has been really awesome to see. Have you been there for a while and kind of experienced and seen that?
Yes, I mean, I've been here since, gosh, I first came to Texas. I grew up in Oklahoma, but came to Texas in
Mm.
2009 and went away for a while. Came back in about 2017, 2018. And I mean, you drive down I-30, there's tower cranes everywhere. Big boom in
Yeah.
healthcare, really, data centers all around as well. And that's actually what brought me to Texas was a data center
Mm.
project. Yeah,
Very
it
cool.
doesn't slow down. DFW feels like a little economic bubble in itself.
Hmm. Yeah. I just saw, I wish I could throw off stats on the top of my head, but literally just before we jumped on, I saw this like infographic of, it was like the state of Texas. And then within the state of Texas, there was like a bunch of stats, like eighth largest economy in the world, a million other amazing stats. So really cool
Yeah,
that you're calling in from there. Yeah. Big fan of Texas.
come on, let's come visit.
Yeah, yeah, I hope to soon. So you did mention, I'm gonna go off on this little tangent. Curious if you're familiar at all. So you mentioned a bunch of data centers. I'm so
Yep.
fascinated by how data centers are getting powered. How are you guys seeing that or addressing that? Are you seeing any of those like micro nuclear plants getting installed anywhere?
I haven't seen one.
Mhm.
DCAC Kirk Offel just did a podcast with some real big brain micronuclear
Mm.
guy who's working on figuring it out. It's a really interesting concept. The only thing I can imagine is for me especially, I do not want one in my backyard. I know
Mhm.
nuclear is by and large safe, really low fail rate. But me with two little kids, sorry, I don't want a micronuclear reactor in my backyard, but and I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way. Um, and that's right. Power, and actually, Kirk said this in his last in that podcast. Everyone's perception is that power is a limiting factor in data center development. What I've seen is probably true, but I think the bigger driving factor is labor, and I do think he's right. And I'm seeing that where I'm at
Mm.
now, um, which fortunately enough, you're talking to someone who builds power delivery,
Mm.
prefabricated power delivery now, and so it is pretty interesting. But if you look at CBRE, put out a really good data center report. They do a pretty good bit of research on where number of megawatts under construction, who has capacity, who doesn't. Um, Atlanta is exploding right now, and we're shipping a lot of equipment to Atlanta. And I did a lot of consulting work out in Atlanta as well. There's some pretty massive campuses out that way. Um, my sense is that it's that way because there's power available. But um,
Mm.
yeah, so
Yeah, that's really interesting. To the point that you brought up, literally I'm not in data center, like generally speaking, in particular, so I don't actually know anything about it other than all I hear is, all right. So those listening, in case you saw a little gap in time, we just had a little bit of connection issues. So what I was saying, and Andrew, I'm interested in kind of your feedback and also what you said there in terms of data centers. I just like to observe. I don't really know or pretend to know anything with data centers. But what's interesting, based on what you just said, is all I hear is power being like a factor, a limiting factor. And what I'm hearing you say is labor, which I think is generally speaking understood as a limiting factor in construction overall, regardless of space. So cool to
yeah.
hear you say that. So does that mean like just existing grids that have, I guess, space or capability can absorb data centers?
Yeah, that's my general understanding of it is that, especially
Mm.
here, the population is expanding so fast, you sort of have to prioritize, do we put power to people, do we put power to machines? In the same way everywhere else where there's budding markets, because, lo and behold, where the power is, the labor force is there as well. So uh, there's there's actually a large data center campus going on in Abilene, Texas right now. And if you drive I-20 out
Mm.
to Abilene, Rosen Electric has 3 billboards on the side of the interstate saying now hiring electricians, and they're just pulling up everybody they can. And you know, when talking to general contractors who are in West Texas, they're having a tough time getting electricians for their projects because it seems like everybody's going to that big data center campus. They can offer a higher wage, a lot more overtime, that sort of thing. General contractor friend of mine was telling me that if they go to build a school, let's say in some remote town in West Texas, they might be lucky to get 2 electricians show up for the whole job. I mean, you might have a 20, $30 million school, and if you get 2 electricians, you're really excited about that. So, um, yeah, it is. I mean, where the people are, there's power, but you kind of have to prioritize between do we power people, do we power machines? And if you're an elected official, I think you want to power people, but you also get revenue from powering the machines. So I'm sure there's
Right.
just it's a catch-22. But that's just my I wish I had a better strategic picture of why, but that's from what I've read. That's my understanding of what's going on.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, really interesting. Well, anyways, let's kind of kick off here. So first question for starter is, I know you have kids, so this will be very relevant for you. Is if your kids, and by the way, obviously tell me if they have. I don't recall their ages. If your kids approach you and tell you they want to enlist, they want to serve, what's your reaction? What do you do?
Yeah, so I mean, we're a ways from that. I have a 2.5-year-old and a 1-year-old right now, so we're a little far out. Both girls. If it's not something that I'll push. It's not something that I'll say, you need to go talk to a recruiter as soon as they turn 16, 17. Um, I'll certainly encourage it. And I plan to parent in a way that sets them up so they can take that path, so they choose. But it's really up to the individual. I'll celebrate. I'll be there when they graduate boot camp or OCS, and I'll celebrate whatever path they choose. But I'm going to set them up. My plan as a parent, right? I get some control. I don't get all of the control. But really, my strategy as a parent to put them in a position they can pick the best path for them and be successful at it. So um, I have no concerns about the overall culture or direction of the military at all. It's done a lot of great things for a lot of people. Um, it's some of my best friends I count from the military. I miss them. I'll probably have the longest running group chat in recorded history with guys I deployed with. I think we hit it every day. I'm pretty sure I talk to those guys every day in the form of memes or just ragging on each other or whatever it is. But um, I would certainly want that for them. But if they choose another path, fine. I'll support them.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Good to hear it. All right, so next question is something that we kind of like brainstormed, and I'm still trying to wrap, I guess, my head around how to address this issue dynamic, whatever you want to call it, which is naturally so when veterans enter the workforce, civilian workforce, there's a cultural gap. And I think it's a two-way street, right? I mean, for veterans
Hmm.
and for civilians, right? Vice versa. How do you see veterans improving, right? That cultural gap and kind of integrating, right, better into civilian workforce and civilian society.
Yeah. Um, There's a really good, it's kind of a meme page that turned into a pretty valuable resource out there. And it's called Sit Reps to Steer Coast. I don't know if you've seen it at all out there, but um, I think the founder's name is Kyle. I forget. I've been following him for, gosh, 3, 4 years now. And I completely agree with his theory, and it's that you need some decompression time. I think he calls it
Mhm.
desanitization, like sanitization time, to fully take off the uniform, fully reset your mind, and come into the civilian workforce from a mindset of, okay, I know I have good skills. I know I did a lot of cool things, but the reality is that no one really cares. And like, well, my past successes are not necessarily an indicator or should be some sort of advanced privilege to current success. No one's going to come and say, "Oh my gosh, you signed a hand receipt for a $500,000. Please come run my however $1 million company." Um, you kind of have to have a mindful reset period between the two, and do your best to understand the the world that you're entering. You won't know everything, but I think if you come into it with an open mind, um, you'll be a lot better off. If, let's say you're a retired sergeant major and you see trash on the floor, it doesn't mean you have to yell at somebody. What that actually means is pick up the trash, put it in the trash can, and hope somebody else saw you do it. If you're coming off as an officer, if you're from any level of command, you're not a CEO equivalent. You led, you demonstrated leadership capacity, uh, but you didn't actually own a P&L. You had no revenue target. You did have a product, I'd say. I think really the best translation between, say, at a command level and in the civilian side is a product manager. Because when I was a company commander, I had a really unique experience. I was a company commander and a product manager simultaneously, working in the civilian side and as a reserve company commander. Um, I'd say my civilian experience shaped my military experience, where I was able to look at my company as a product. So, me being a logistics officer, my product was service to the ground combat element. And so looking at, my people need to be really capable. We need to be adaptable. We need to be able to deliver what we say we're going to deliver on time. And we need to have processes and people in place to be able to do that. So, yeah, I mean, if you're a battalion commander, like, guess what? You are not a CEO. If you're a regimental commander, guess what? You're not a CEO. So take some time to kind of scale yourself back, understand the problem set in front of you, and attack it with an open mind and a good attitude. And you will go far. You'll go a lot further and more quickly than your peers, but you have to completely just reset your mind a little bit. It's a good strategy for that. If you're transitioning from the officer side, you already have a bachelor's degree, go get an MBA, go get a master's of science in something. Take some time to up your education and your skills. If you're coming from the enlisted side, go to college, use the GI Bill. The GI Bill might be the greatest benefit out there. Leverage the heck out of it. And I would completely advocate for trade schools. Again, going back to the labor shortage, if college isn't for you, and it's not for a lot of people who join the military, but they're really technically competent, they're good with their hands, they're good with systems and processes, go to trade school, be an electrician, pipe fitter, welder. We can't get enough skilled trades right now. And you'll come out, honestly, looking at people who I grew up with who went to trades instead of to say college. People in the trades, I mean, I think everybody comes out at about the same place. There's a lot of 30-year-olds electrical contracting owners out there. Talking with some friends of mine, I was helping them. They own a glazing company here in Fort Worth, and they're just starting up, but looking at their outlook 10 years from now, they're going to crush it, especially if they just continue to provide good, reliable service and remain responsive. Um, who knows how far that company will go. So I'd say summarize it, take a reset period, look at the problem set in front of you from an objective position. I'm not saying, completely get rid of your identity as a veteran or having served in the past, but, put your ego to the side and go solve problems with some tools that you got from the military, because there are a lot of things that translate over, and I'll talk to those later. But yeah, I'd say come at it with a good attitude. So
Yeah, no, great answer.
I might get a lot of people yelling at me for saying like, if you're a battalion commander, guess what? You're not a CEO, but I don't care. That's fine. It's,
No, I mean, I think the reality. First of all, great answer. We'll put a pin on some of those because we're definitely going to revisit them. When we get
yeah,
to the section of transition military to civilian, and then also, as you noted, translatable skills, military to built environment, civilian profession. But to your point, what I find to be the case is if you want to create like a analogy relatability to civilian world is if you're going from marketing to I don't know accounting, right? You're going to have some form of reset. You can
yeah,
leverage that knowledge that you have, that experience that you have forward once the time comes, but you still need that form of reset per se because you're really going into a completely different industry. So yeah, I mean I agree with that. End of the day, it sucks to hear and it sucks to go through it, obviously. But it is what it is, and you gotta, kind of reestablish yourself, and taking that kind of grace period, and decompression period, whatever you call it, whatever you want to call it, I think is absolutely correct.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and don't chase the first job offer. Oh man, this is what my salary would be, and it's twice of what I was getting in the military. Like, do not chase a salary number. Absolutely do not. Offload anything that's if you got a bunch of car payments and a bunch of other crap, like get rid of that. You'll be fine. It'll all wash out in the end. Put yourself in a position where you can make sound decisions with a 20-year plan in mind instead of just being able to brag to your buddies that you pulled down a salary that's above theirs. But let's look at it from that mindset.
Yeah, well said. And I also completely agree about the trades, especially in comparison to like traditional university. If especially so, if in the case you're going to a traditional university and you don't have a direction and you end up with a degree that doesn't translate into anything in particular, I think the trades is undervalued or undermarketed. I guess would be the right word.
Hmm.
I really hope to see in the coming years that pick up and I don't know who would be responsible for that. Maybe it's like big GC companies or big trade companies. But I'd love to see some more like active marketing, just generally speaking, to promote the industry because exactly as you put it, really awesome angle to go in, electrician, plumber, piper, whatever it is. And you see a lot of entrepreneurs who are successful early because of the massive need and massively growing need for any trade. So it's a
Yeah,
really great angle to start your career in.
yeah, absolutely. I think right now, if you have a master electrician's license, the sky's the limit.
Absolutely, totally agree with you. All right, Andrew. So we're gonna do a life story. Everyone starts with an introduction. So I'm gonna go ahead and give your formal introduction. Andrew Piland served 9 years in the
Sorry,
Marine Corps
Piland.
as a reserve pilot.
Yeah,
You
all
know
good.
what? I
All
always get
good.
it wrong, and thank you for correcting me. So we're gonna
Yeah,
do a
yeah,
little
you're not the only
reverse
one.
restart there.
Not a problem.
Andrew Andrew Piland served 9 years in the Marine Corps as a reserve logistics officer with the Combat Logistics Battalion, CLB 453 and 23, and 6 ANGLICO Naval Gunfire Liaison Company.
Yeah,
Andrew deployed to Central America in 2017 to 2018 as a logistics officer with a security cooperation training team, training foreign militaries in Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and Belize, and led logistics and engineering efforts in all four countries. Andrew finished his service as a company commander of a transportation services company, CLB 23, in Lathrop, California. Today, Andrew is a senior manager at Modular Power Solutions, a modular construction company working on full service electrical skid integrators. Andrew also partners with his dad's cattle operation. Really excited to hear about that. And supports a nonprofit called Miracle Farm in Texas. Most importantly, Andrew is a husband and father. I was worried I would get it wrong the second time because so often I do that. Is I'll
yeah.
get corrected and then my brain just like gets stuck on my first interpretation. So glad you corrected me. Glad I got it right. Let's
No,
kick
that's
off
good.
with childhood, where you grew
Yeah,
up and kind of what led you to service.
yeah, absolutely. So born in Southwest Kansas, in a town called Liberal, Kansas. If anyone out there listening knows where Liberal is, get on you, call me, let's go get beers. But but yeah, so dad was an oil and gas petroleum engineer, um, and we were out there. We moved pretty early. We moved back. We moved to Oklahoma. Kind of followed his job, um, and he worked for a long time in oil and gas industry as an engineer. Grew up primarily around Tulsa, Oklahoma. Um, mostly into sports as a kid. We'd go. Baseball, football were my two sports. Wrestled a little bit too. Um, but while I was growing up, it was really kind of I get on my bike and I'd go all around the neighborhood and we just had a lot of fun. I don't know if I was a full on latchkey kid where the parents have no idea where I am and I just need to be home by dinner time. But I remember growing up with a lot of freedom where I was and had friends and we have this little bike gang and we do BMX and skateboards and stuff like that. So, um, but yeah, when I wasn't doing that, it was mostly sports, baseball, football. Pretty, halfway decent at both, I'd say. Like maybe above average high school athlete, but not good enough to play in college. Maybe D1 for sure, but maybe D2, D3 or something. But um, yeah, and it was so yeah, But also growing up, I was kind of a nerd, a book nerd. When gosh, I think it was fourth or fifth grade, maybe even early as third grade. I started reading about the Revolutionary War. And I remember getting every book I could get my hands on about the American Revolution. And then from there, I read everything that I could comprehend and read. And then I read about the Civil War, maybe like fourth, fifth grade, and read everything I could get my hands on about the Civil War. And then I went into, I think I skipped over all the late 1800s wars, but I went into World War One, and then World War Two, and then Vietnam. And I think by the time I finished reading everything I could read about Vietnam, I was graduating high school. Um, but huge nerd, love books. That was another thing I did. And as a part of that, that's kind of what started getting my wheels turning about joining the military. That was I'd say my freshman year of high school is when I
Mhm.
started to say, okay, look, I want to set myself up to do this at some point. Um, and yeah, so that was me growing up, mostly around Tulsa, Oklahoma. Live in Texas now, um, but still have family up in Oklahoma and love going back to visit.
Did you have other either peers or family members that served that also potentially had impact on kind of your, I don't know, awareness or desire to join to serve?
I did, and really, both my grandfathers served. My
Mhm.
dad's dad was an Air Force admin officer. That's when everybody did it, right? And he did it, got the GI Bill, and leveraged GI Bill to go on and get his doctorate. He was a career educator. My mom's dad was a tank mechanic in the early
Mhm.
'60s, late '50s, early '60s, and he turned into an admin assistant because they figured out he could type. Back when typing was a rare skill, and I think he took a typing class in high school or something. His first sergeant found out and said, "Guess what? You're now our admin." And so, um, this, I remember growing up, going with him, and just hearing his stories of being in the army, basic training, and I was just fascinated by it. I couldn't ask him enough questions about being on the rifle range and running the 88. I don't think they had an 88 wrecker back then. Whatever the tank wrecker was back then, running the wrecker and telling me stories. He was in during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I forget which unit he was at. I'm pretty sure he was attached to the 82nd. Um, telling me stories of looking out on the flight line and transport aircraft are spinning up, staying warm in case they've got to go out real quick. Um, so yeah, always fascinated me. And I think that had a lot of influence on me saying, okay, yeah, I want to go join. I want to serve. Um, and he'd also, talk about freedom as a kid. So they lived on a farm in Northwest Illinois. German Catholic immigrants. Long, they've been there a while, but still pretty German Catholic part of Illinois. And he lived on a farm. And he would give me I think I shot my first 22 at 4 years old. I was not very old. First time I shot a gun. And by the time I was 8, I would get 2 boxes of shells, two 50-round boxes of shells, put in my pocket, and I'd just go loose on the farm, and I'd go explore through the woods, shooting squirrels or logs, whatever. Um, and there's just something about that freedom of walking through the woods with a gun. I don't know. Um, but yeah, that probably that's how the family probably the most influence on me wanting to join.
Mhm. Yeah, that's awesome. It's cool to hear that your grandfather was open in terms of sharing stories, because a lot of times we hear that generation, generally speaking, being very withdrawn and or just not willing to share at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really neat to hear that.
Yeah, well, and he never went to combat, so we didn't have a lot to kind of keep close to his chest. It might upset me,
Mhm.
but one story from him, and it's sort of the life story for them, is that the Army gave him a path out of really rural. I wouldn't say impoverished, but not a it was once you graduated high school, you went straight back to the farm, and with the equipment and farming methods they had at that time, it was basically subsistence farming, and it gave him an opportunity to go get an apprenticeship as a precision machinist. And once he got out, he had 6 kids, right? Like German Catholic family. Like there's a lot of kids coming along. He was able to support a pretty large family and do well. Just through an apprenticeship he got after the military, and eventually worked his way up to an engineering manager. And so, yeah, so military gave him and the family a great opportunity, sent my mom to college and all that. And I think that set us up for, generational forward mobility.
Mm. Yeah, that's amazing. Awesome. All right, so you start freshman year. What happens from freshman year to enlisting? How does that happen?
Cool. I think I popped out there for a second. I'm back though. You good?
Yeah, with
Okay,
you.
cool.
So the question, yeah, I'm guessing I didn't hear the question was,
No.
so jumping back to where I had kind of, reverse track there was freshman year of college, right? Freshman year of college.
Yep.
At what point do you enlist? Kind of, how does that happen? How does that play out?
Yeah. So, always kind of having the military in the back of my mind. I was looking at either going Air Force or Naval Academy. Went and visited Naval Academy, thought it was pretty cool. Was starting to talk through with my dad about, how do we go through the process of getting accepted and all of that. And he and I were sitting on the couch one Saturday morning watching football, and I forget who, but somebody was playing Texas A&M, and I saw the Corps of Cadets on the sideline at this A&M game. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they've got tan World War II, Class C uniforms, the high leather boots. That's they've been wearing that since, gosh, probably before World War II. And I remember seeing those guys on the sidelines and asked my dad, I said, "What is that? Is that a military academy? What's going on?" And he told me basically what he knew about it, but it made me want to stop in and do some more exploring and understand about it. And when I looked at Texas A&M, their program, it's a senior military college. It's a pipeline to becoming a military officer. They put more officers in the service during World War II than the Naval Academy and the U.S. Military Academy combined. So a large
Wow.
military history coming out of Texas A&M. I looked into it, fell in love with the idea where like I could go be a part of the Corps of Cadets. I knew I wanted to do military and an engineering degree, be a part, get an engineering degree, and I could also have a life on the weekends instead of, being locked up. Because I mean, I wanted to go out and go hunt and go do stuff on the weekends, and so looked into it, did a spend the night with the Corps my junior or senior year. Loved it, loved the guys. It seemed like a really good fit for me, and went into Texas A&M in the Corps Cadets actually as an Army cadet. It's a deep dark secret I don't talk about too much, but yeah, I actually started on an Army pipeline. Um, I mean, I guess I knew I wanted to go to the Marine Corps before I went to Texas A&M, but the way Texas A&M is structured is they're different companies and different what they call outfits. Which, if I had to loosely relate it to something, I would loosely relate it to kind of like a fraternity, and they all have different personalities. Well, the one outfit that I
Mhm.
thought I identified with the most was, they're into athletics. They're the technical outfit, which meant most of them were on an engineering track, and I really liked the guys. So I said, "Hey, I'll go in and be a part of this, just because I think the culture is the best fit for me." And one of the stipulations was you go in as an Army contract or as an Army cadet. I said, "Okay, that's fine." Because the way Texas A&M is structured, you do 2 years of ROTC, but then you can pick after that 2 years.
Mm.
Which even unique about Texas A&M, unlike service academies, you get 2 years to decide if you want to continue to your junior senior year, and at that point you're locked in. At Texas A&M, you could go 2 years, decide, you know what, military is not for me, but I still want the leadership experience and training that comes with the Corps of Cadets, and so you can stay on and be on a non-commissioning route, but still be a part of the culture and a part of the training. So I knew I had options coming into it if I didn't need to lock myself into the Army per se.
Yeah, interesting. I had no idea of that program. It sounds like an awesome program. How did you know? I think I heard you say you knew you wanted to go into Marines, and you also knew you wanted an engineering degree. How did both of those things come about? In I guess you're still speaking of just your freshman year.
Yeah. I think engineering was always I kind of knew that's where I wanted to go. My dad was a petroleum engineer. I spent a lot of
Mm.
time going to drilling rigs with him, going to well completions with him. I might be the youngest person ever on active drilling floor. I think I was 8 years old, walking around on a drilling rig with I was all hard hat at that time. Um, 'Cause him as the engineer, I would equate it to like an owner's rep. If you look at the construction industry, his role was
Mm.
just like an owner's rep on these rigs. And so, I got to go see it, and even as a little kid. And so I knew that was pretty cool, and I knew I wanted to do that. And it kind of fit. I think I probably have more of an English and writing brain than a strictly engineering brain. But you know, I thought it was pretty cool. But so yeah, that was the engineering piece. I think what was the other one? The Marine Corps piece. I just thought it was cool. I thought Marines were cool. No one in my family had been in the Marine Corps, but I don't think I really kind of got the bug to go be a Marine officer until maybe junior or senior year. And I don't know
Mm.
exactly where that came from, but I remember my football coach asking me sometime during football practice or before it or something, and say, Andrew, what do you want to be later on? What are your goals? And I said, I want to go be a Marine officer. Um, that's kind of where I sort of look at the Marine Corps and eventually circling back to it my sophomore year in college.
Mm. Okay, yeah, awesome, awesome. So I guess it sounds like you started at the end of or at some point in your freshman year that program at Texas A&M, and that's kind of how you carried through into the Marine Corps.
Yeah, so as an Army cadet, you kind of have to pick, after your second year, and I
Mm.
had Army contract paperwork on the table when I left for Christmas break in my sophomore year. Like, hey, I'm going to contract, going to go do this, and I kind of paused and I said, okay, before I sign this contract and just completely lock myself in, let's go look at the Marine Corps. So luckily I was home in Tulsa for Christmas break. There's an officer selection office in Stillwater, Oklahoma, maybe an hour and a half west of Tulsa. And, I said, hey, let me go talk to them real fast. And so I kind of have two things in front of me and look at it. And I went there, took a PFT with them, or a physical fitness test with them, did well on it. Um, I hit all the right wickets, and then decided, you know what, I probably want to go Marine Corps. So I told the Army when I got back, I said, guys, this has been fun, but let's go Marine Corps. And so, but the way the Marine Corps worked is I was a little too late for an ROTC scholarship, but they had a program where you could commission later, either go to OCS while you were in college or set it up where you go to OCS like right after college. And so
Mm.
I kept talking to the Marine Corps. My plan, I eventually went to OCS, just 10-week OCS after I graduated college, and then went straight through from there.
So does that mean at that 2-year mark with that cadet program, Army program, like did you just stop at that 2-year mark, or you carried through until graduation?
I carried through. Yeah, I carried through. I
Mm.
mean, my best friends were in that company, and it was. I love the structure because you don't have to be contracted.
Mhm.
You can still stay with it, and I made lifelong friends there. Actually, I met my wife at one of my buddies' weddings. From that deal. It was kind of funny. He
Amazing.
married my wife's best friend from college, and they put us in the wedding party where we thought we would like each other. Turns out they were right. Here we are 6 years later. Um, but yeah, I mean, made lifelong friends. Hell, two of them today. It's their birthday today. I texted two of the guys like, "Hey man, happy birthday!" That kind of deal. Um, so was fortunate to have that program where you could stick with it and still get some good leadership experience. I think one of the defining leadership moments for me was being pulled out of my comfort zone and having to take a
Mhm.
leadership challenge head on very early. I mentioned how you have those different outfits in the Corps of Cadets, and you kind of grow up with your home outfit and you stay with them, and those are your boys, that's your crew. Well, my junior year, I was applying to go be the company commander for my outfit, and it looked like I was going to do it. But then the commandant basically came to me and said, the commandant is a retired one-star. At the time, is General Joe Ramirez came to me and said, "Hey, look, yeah, cool, you can go become the commander at your home outfit, but there's another outfit who's struggling. They've got a pretty rough culture over the last few years. It's gone downhill. They got rid of none of their freshmen stayed over the last 2 or 3 years. They got them all of them quit because they said, I don't want any part of this." And so he basically said, "Hey, you've got two options. You can either go take over this company, this struggling company, or I won't consider you for command at all." And it's kind of a strong arm, like I had my hopes and dreams of going to lead my friends and everything. And I
Right.
said, "Okay, cool. Sticking around for the leadership experience." So, I went and was basically forced into this struggling company as a company commander. People hated me because I actually made people show up for formation on time. Up standards. Like you know, I understand. Like there's a law, then there's a spirit of the law. Like it was more kind of like let's keep this thing on the right path. Let's not you know be mean to our freshmen just for the sake of being mean to them. Let's actually build them up. We're going to be hard on them, but we're going to build them up. We're going to turn them into a product that we can be proud of 5, 10, 20, 30 years down the road. Because after all, I mean, we're deep in Afghanistan at that time. Like, these guys are going to combat as soon as they graduate from here. And we need all the good leaders we can get. I don't want to lose one
Mm.
because we were being stupid. I wanted to help be a part of their success,
Sure.
and not just that, but mostly the success of the soldiers that they were going to go lead afterwards. So, stepped in, did that.
Yeah.
That was really
Sure.
hard. No one liked me, but I think later people reached out and appreciated what I'd done. So I think that was a really defining moment in my leadership development. So glad I had the opportunity to do that at Texas A&M.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I would, I'd almost suggest that kind of typical where in that defining moment of creating the culture of a group, those people are not going to like you. But then later on, in a hindsight kind of a dynamic, they'll probably really appreciate what you did and kind of how you led and I don't know, shaped their culture and got them through that program. So yeah, that sounds like an awesome opportunity. So you get to graduation. walk us through kind of what happens from between graduation and Marine Corps.
Quick before you start,
Yeah. All right, Andrew. So walk us through not enlisting, but commissioning into Marine Corps after you finish graduation.
totally. So, man, I signed and actually signed an OCC contract because this was 2000 and actually an OCCR contract. So this was 2013. After my thoughts would be about to progress, they basically said, "Hey, man, there's no money right now. What we have are reserve contracts. If you want to go to the Marine Corps, go be an officer. You can go in on reserve contracts. If you get like the top 5% of your class, it's cool. Um, you'll get an option for an active contract, but this is what we have." And at the end of the time, I said, "Okay, cool. Do that. I'll figure it out. I'll give you top 5%." Um, and so between graduation and actually getting off to OCS, I went back and I worked on a ranch. I was just training horses and, just working on a ranch for the summer and um, doing ranch work. I don't think I lifted a weight or ran a mile and between graduating and OCS, but ranch work isn't easy, and I think that
Mhm.
prepared me better than just going to the weight room in the air conditioning or running on a track for
Yeah.
however long and then going sitting inside. Um, so went to OCS in September of 13. That was a 10-week program. Made it through. OCS for me wasn't that hard. It's just kind of annoying. I don't know, annoying is the right word. That sounds a bit disparaging. It's not what I meant to say. I guess it was like, can this just be over? you know, like,
Sure.
like I, you know, I
Well,
think,
do you
yeah,
think like because of your university experience, it was like that? I'd have to imagine because you already got like kind of broken in per se or understood the gist of things.
yeah, that's right. Yeah. The Corps Cadets definitely gave me a leg up. So, when they first bring out the sergeant instructors to yell, "Hurry up, get out," whatever, all that, like, okay, cool. I mean, let's jump into the end line. You know,
Yeah.
there was a lot of talk there. I think the one thing that really frustrated me with OCS was so the way the Marine Corps does OCS is about week before you get liberty, which in Marine Corps terms and naval terms means you get some free time. And not just free time where, you can run about the squawk bay as you see fit. Like you can go out in town and go get dinner, go get a meal. Um, and they do that, from my perspective, as a part of an additional screening process to see how you behave on your own. And so you'll be locked up for 4 weeks,
Mm.
and then you'll get 24 hours of liberty on the weekend. And the only time I actually got kind of frustrated was it made you sign out with a buddy, and you had to stick with that buddy for 24 hours. And I was like, all right, I'm a grown man. You got your 6 foot away from trusting you with things that will level cities potentially. I've got to sign out to go get dinner with the bud. Like, is that how this is going to go for the rest of my career? Like, I'm not into that. I mean, I would say I considered quitting, but I was not happy about it. My my squad, and my buddy was back my rack mate. I pretty little session with him on that. The whole time. He fired with it. It's marveling the um, yeah. So yeah, went from OTS to the program. I really did fine. Went to the basic school. So the way the Marine Corps does this is they'll send you to OTS, and then you go to the basic school. And your officer goes through the basic school. It is a leadership development program built on an infantry model. So you learn the monitor every Marine or rifleman. I wouldn't take it as far as say that I'm a right commander because I'm not. My infantry officers are right. commanders. But the basic school gives you, an opportunity to learn leadership on an infantry model. So they teach you basically being a rifle platoon commander. Um, and everybody goes through it. You make really good friends while you're doing it. It's about 6.5 months long. And then about halfway through the basic school, you put in for what MOS, what job you want, and you get selected based on several factors, and away you go. Well, my situation was pretty unique because I came in as a reserve contract. And the way these reserve contracts go is you get two options. You could pick to be guaranteed to go to a unit within 150 miles of your home of record. For me, that was around Tulsa, Oklahoma. So there were really two units that they could send me to. There was an infantry unit and an artillery unit that I could go to. So I went into OCS thinking, okay, I'm going to be an infantry or an artillery officer. Cool. Well, something happened within the shuffling of people to different places and all that, that the Marine Corps came to me halfway through TBS and said, "Hey, look, the infantry unit you could go to is full. We're not taking lieutenants right now, and the artillery battery you're going to or could go to is full, not taking lieutenants right now. So here's the deal: you can sign this piece of paper that says you'll go anywhere to any unit, and we'll try to get you as close to home and as the job you want as possible. We'll do our best. Solemnly swear we'll do our best. Good stuff. Or you can get out of the Marine Corps right now." So I'm halfway through TBS, right? Like I'm shotgunning the Marine Corps Kool-Aid, and I get this option to sign a piece of paper and basically be at their mercy, or completely get out of the Marine Corps and figure out life totally anew. I said, okay, fine, I'll sign the paper. It really wasn't much of a decision for me. And so, what ended up happening was I got selected to go, the unit that was closest, that fit all the criteria, was to be a logistics officer in Grand Prairie, Texas, which is here in Dallas, Fort Worth. And so, fine. So then after the basic school, you go to your MOS school, which for me was logistics officer course at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. It was 3 months long. And so like from the day I started officer candidate school to the day I graduated from logistics officer school was exactly 365 days. I went just straight through. Um, and then from there, they said, okay, you're done with your initial active duty time. Go check into your unit, and best of luck finding a civilian job. Best of luck putting food on the table. It's basically like what I was left with. So, previously they had previously they'd had a program where they would put a reserve officer on active duty for a year, just kind of as
Mm.
what they call it, a development period. But there was no money at that time, and so there was no
Yeah.
1 year active duty period for me. Um, so I
I
went
was gonna
to I was
yeah, I was gonna say that seems really surprising that they'd essentially carry you through all of that training, aka money, right? Money and time invested into you, and then just be like, okay, all right, see you later. But but before even carrying through, just taking that 365, that literal year mark, any kind of like memorable experiences or things that were particularly hard, or I don't know, just anything that like sticks with you to today.
uh, so TPS it was challenging. You're not used to being out in the field for 5 days at a time. Um, you hike a lot. You're wet. You're cold. Anytime you go to the field, North Virginia might be the coldest and hottest place in the world all at the same time. It's impressive how hot it can get and how cold it can get. Um, but TBS wasn't that bad. I think the biggest takeaway were the friends from TBS. Uh, and it's funny for I see like all my friends from TBS and my best friends from the Marine Corps, all of the last names are pretty low to mine. Like the whole winning gradients, they're all around my portion of the alphabet island. Um, and so, a good friend, we were running different Cadets. We were in the same squad together at the basic school, and his last name was with an L. We stayed in touch. Made a good old boy from Kentucky. We were one comment, and he turned out he was an 18 pilot. He went on a pilot track, and he comes to drills here in Fort Worth. They 112, and flies out here in Fort Worth. So when he comes in the drill, we hang out. It's we'll drink beers and talk and catch up on life. He had three little girls, and it's a lot of fun. So that's the big takeaway, not just from kind of that new period, but also just from the whole 9 years. It's just the friends you make as you go. It's just the thing that'll stay with me forever.
Yeah, awesome, Andrew. That's a really really cool story. Love how the world gets smaller in these circumstances. Always cool to hear how those kinds of things happen. All right, so moving forward, kind of where I had put a pause in your story was you got to the moment where it was the end of your active duty, and what's the decision there? What happens next?
Yeah, so the Marine Corps has a way of being funny about things, and I was supposed to logistics officer. I'd done my training. I was driving back to check in my unit in Fort Worth, driving from North Carolina to Fort Worth. Somewhere around Tennessee, I get a phone call and says, "Hey, just kidding. You're not going to Grand Prairie. We're actually going to put you in Lubbock, Texas." Which, if you don't know Texas geography, Lubbock is not close to anything. It's in far west Texas, up in the Panhandle, and I was not happy about it because Dallas Fort Worth area, close to work and whatever. Um, it was pretty tough. So I said, okay. So I went, checked in Lubbock. I was working on getting a full time job, but I didn't have it yet. So I went back to the ranch. I went back and worked on a ranch in Texas again. And eventually, pretty soon I applied to and got, at the time was my dream job. I got accepted to be a completions engineer at Halliburton. So I was going to go do well completions, basically going out as they're drilling a well. You'll put all kinds of tools down hole, pumps, whatever, to basically complete it out, or you'll go and fix wells that aren't producing as well. You'll go pump cement, you'll do whatever. So that was my dream job. I got it. I got hired on as an engineer there. And for about 10 months, it was great. I was living in Arkansas, Western Arkansas at the time. That was the yard they put me at. That's where the experience was. And I would work. I'd be on the road, basically living out of a truck. And once a month, I would get my 1996 F-250 and drive from Western Arkansas to Lubbock, Texas for drill. And it was probably 7 hour drive. So I know that's,
Wow.
but to fly, it was probably 8 hours, total travel time to fly. And I didn't have any mobility when I was there. So I would just drive. I would leave work maybe, a few hours early on a Friday and work probably, I don't know, 24 hours, 26, 27 hours. We worked a lot. So, working from 5 a.m. to 10 at night on Saturday, and then working from 5 a.m. to about 4 o'clock on Sunday, get in my truck and drive home. I'd usually have to stop somewhere in southern Oklahoma and take a nap because you know how it is when you're driving tired, it's not safe.
Yeah.
So, roll into work about 7, 8 o'clock on Monday morning and get back to it. And that was my life for a while, for about 10 months. Was, doing that, loving it, just living on my own, single guy, having a blast, doing Marine Corps on the weekends and, completing oil wells for a job. And about 2015, that I got laid off from Halliburton. They totally shut down my yard. Huge downsizing. I was doing really well in my engineering advancement program, but they they downsized the whole thing. And so I was left to basically transition again and find a new career. Fortunately, and then I went back to the ranch again. That was always my fallback, man. And that's kind of, way I look at it now is yeah, sure. Okay. Like I can take risk, and if it fails, cool, man, I'll go back to riding horses. That's fine.
Sure.
I can
Sure.
make that work. But yeah, so I went to, basically moved back in with my folks for about 6 months while I was job hunting, and anyway, I went back to the ranch in Texas, and then around like Thanksgiving time, I moved back in with my folks and did some more job hunting up around Northeast Oklahoma. And my cousin was a project manager for Whiting Turner on a data center in Northeast Oklahoma, big data center campus up there in Northeast Oklahoma. She was a project manager, reached out, said, "Hey, you should come work for us." And she did it really early after I got laid off. I said, "No, thanks. Construction, no, probably not. Like I want to get in oil and gas or something," because I thought that was always my trajectory. But kind of quickly, I realized after not too long that oil and gas probably wasn't going to be my long-term solution. My dad had managed to do it for a long career, but in talking to him, he was one of the very few, because it's so cyclical and just very volatile, especially in mid-continent, which is Kansas, Oklahoma. So I decided, okay, look, I'll go give this construction thing a try. Signed on with Whiting Turner as a field engineer, which is basically on the superintendent track. Worked up there. It was still while I was drilling. I think by that time I was drilling in Abilene, Texas. I got tapped to go be the officer in charge of a maintenance detachment in Abilene after I did maybe about a year and a half as a platoon commander in Lubbock. And then, went and built data centers. Did a lot of like retrofit type work. We weren't doing ground up builds at that time, but I did that for about 2 years. And in that 2 years, I got a call to mobilize. And so I did. I packed up my stuff in my house, put it in storage, and mobilized for about a year to Central America. So yeah.
So before we go to that deployment, in this period of time, which sounds like, what was that, like 2-3 years, more or less?
About 2 years, yeah.
Yeah. So that 2-year period, talk to us a little bit about, what your weekends were like. What was like your typical, I don't know, objective mission set? What were you just doing, generally speaking, each weekend?
Yeah, as a reservist, I mean, basically on the reserve side, you have to get as much training as you can in a really short amount of time. So going to drill is always a kick in the butt. For me, especially Marine Corps Reserve, and kind of I wasn't at like a headquarters. I was at a line unit. It was a logistics unit, but it was a motor T unit. And we had to drive. We had to do convoys. We had to practice, and so you were always fitting a lot of stuff into a very short amount of time. I don't remember sitting down very much. And also too, from an administrative requirement, you have to hit all of the same annual requirements as active duty does. You have to, all your medical stuff, all your annual training stuff, all those sort of overhead administrative requirements you have to hit while doing your best to maintain some level of competence in your job. If you look at it, reservists just by nature, we're not going to be as good operationally as an active duty unit who does it day in and day out. I've heard reservists deploying with active duty say, within about 2 months, you forget who's reservist and who's not, just because you pick it up, you flatten that learning curve. But
sure.
It was a scramble to stay somewhat operationally competent, to keep our vehicles running, and while simultaneously meeting all the administrative requirements. So yeah, I mean, 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. on a Saturday drill was not uncommon. Actually I had a bedroll, I don't know if like a bedroll, like cowboys sleep on a bedroll. That's kind of a cowboy thing. I'm not a cowboy by any means, but it's basically just a canvas roll that it had, like foam layer in it that I rolled out in my office, and that's what I slept on. at drill.
Yeah.
And like that's what it was. And so, yeah, I mean, that typical weekend you're doing that. We were running convoys, or we would do a long drill weekend to go to the rifle range. We had to travel a little bit to go to a rifle range. Fort Sill, Oklahoma was about 3 hours away. We go there, maybe two. Fort Hood, Texas, we do that. And then in the summer, we would always do a 2-week training exercise. And we go, most of the time, it seemed like we always went to 29 Palms. It did a big service level training exercise. They call ITX for us. We did that quite a bit. That was always that was a beat down every time we go out there. You're 5 a.m., 10 p.m., running ragged, maybe 2 hours of sleep, 3/4 if you're lucky. Just going as fast as you can to get as much training in as you can in that short amount of time. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, that's drill is no joke. And then, simultaneously as a drilling reservist, you're always keeping up with what's going on at the unit. So for me as a platoon commander, there's always a roster that we had to figure out. We always had to do pre-drill planning, pre-drill conference calls. There at certain periods of time, and this is bad, but I'll admit to it, like certain periods of time, like I would have my work computer up and my personal computer up with reserve stuff. So if I got kind of a little lull in what I was doing at work, I would hop over and do my reserve thing real quick and then go back to work. Or I would take a call from my first sergeant or platoon sergeant, whoever, during the day. And then at night, I'd go home, work out, eat dinner, and then work on reserve stuff for an hour or two. This is kind of how it was. I mean, for me as a platoon commander or as an officer in charge, or even later as I became, I was an S4 and then a company commander. I don't have time to sit down and do my cyber awareness training during drill. I've got to lead. I've got to get out there and I've got to keep this thing moving forward. So all of those things I basically have to do on my own time before you show up. If I'm on a hit list for having done this annual training or whatever, it looks bad. You if you want your people to do it, you have to be the first one to do it. So it was, and going back to the transition piece, I think for me, I never had like a totally clean break from the Marine Corps working in a civilian job, right? Like it was, I was always pushing kind of 2 careers forward at the same time. So I had to train my brain to go, like I'm Lieutenant Piland or Captain Piland today, and right now I'm Andrew, and do that multiple times in the same day. I learned how to do it. Sometimes they would blend over, and that didn't always work out for me. But yeah, that was a challenge, and eventually I got pretty decent at it. But at first, I struggled with it.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, that sounds really hard, and I was going to ask all those questions that you kind of addressed. One being, I was going to say, there's no way you weren't doing some reserve duty on your personal time, because it sounds like you couldn't possibly accomplish everything just on reserve time. So, yeah, I mean, as you pointed out, and then kind of that mixing back and forth is in its own right super difficult, and also definitely a skill that I'm sure you ended up kind of, as you just pointed out, kind of like mastering. But we'll kind of dive really into that, I guess, after your deployment. So going back to, I guess, that 2017 timeframe, you get called up for this deployment. Walk us through that process.
Yeah. So the mission for the deployment was a security cooperation training team, which basically is a partnership between it's primarily a reserve mission. So most people who I mobilized with were reservists. And the idea there is to maintain relations with our Central American partners. There is a full-time, a year-round security cooperation training team that rotated on 6-month intervals. But every other 6 months, a special purpose Marine Air Ground Task Force, also known as MAGTAF, would roll in and be on call for hurricane disaster relief. And so I was there when the MAGTAF was not there. And so my primary job was to be the team logistics officer and to support our training teams in El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Belize, primarily mostly moving ammo around. I kind of joked, like, I don't know if you've seen the movie American Made with Barry Seal, that the whole Barry Seal, Iran Contra story, right? Like, I kind of joked, like, yep, I'm Barry Seal. I'm moving, I'm moving cargo around Central America that if I wasn't with the U.S. government, I wouldn't be allowed to do. So yeah, we moved a lot of ammo around Central America, and it was mostly for training programs that we were doing with the Central American countries. Basically running like a basic training for their Marines, and maybe an maybe some more advanced infantry training for them. We weren't actually going out on operations with them, but especially in El Salvador, they were like leaving our compound, going straight to combat. So it was cool to see, knowing that we were training these guys for the real life. But yeah, I did that, and then also too, there's a sub theme in here about reservists having multiple skill sets. They found out, oh, you're a construction guy. Like, yeah, I am, man. Well, okay, cool. We have this problem. We have a lot of our team houses are completely dilapidated, and they need to be. We need some serious remodel work done. So we need you to go start with a team in Guatemala, go see what they have going on, and see if you can't fix it. Because the team was getting sick, and just from living in that house. And so I went and checked it out. There's no public utility really there. You've got septic, you've got a cistern for your water supply, and that's really about it. If you're from that cistern, the water they get is brought in on trucks, and it's not clean water. Like they're backing up to a river somewhere, pumping it into this truck and delivering it to that team cistern. So it's not potable. And it's not even clean enough to shower with, really. So we had people getting eye infections and all kinds of stuff. So I went in there and looked at they had basically a pool sanitation system. No one had maintained it. It was a completely a wreck. So I went out, contracted with a local pool company, got that up and running for them, did facility assessment, fixed the roof, did all kinds of stuff. Like I had to basically do a big, I was called like a civilian close logistics movement to get them the construction material they needed to get that house to a place that they can live in and not get sick every other week. Did the same thing. El Salvador had a pretty good team house, didn't have to worry about them. But then after we had that successful effort at the team house in Guatemala, the MAGTAF did their PDSS, pre-deployment site survey, and there's an air wing component that comes with them. And so the pilots go look at where they're going to be staying, and they were going to be staying in an air base in northern Guatemala. Well, the pilots went to that air base and basically said, we're not staying here. Whole MAGTAF needs to stay out in town in hotels. This air conditioning doesn't work. We're not going to be able to sleep, all that stuff, right? I give pilots a hard time about being grim and honest. And so, it's like, I got sent up there to look at it, and they were right. Wasn't a great base. The Guatemalans were going to host us. So, but we needed to kind of upscale it a little bit. So I went up there, wrote scopes, did a bunch of pre-con stuff, worked with the embassy to put out an RFP to local contractors, and got Guatemala contractors to come up there, walk the job with them. And I didn't actually get the contract signed. My replacement did that. But yeah, I did a bunch of pre-con in Guatemala, and that was the engineering side of what I was doing. But going back to reserve, I had another reservist with me. He was a logistics MOS. He was a sergeant, but on the civilian side, he was a union elevator installer up in the Bay Area, and pretty competent guy. And I didn't have a lot of work for him back. We were based in Honduras at an air base in Honduras, kind of where the team was centralized. That's where all my ammo was. That's where the Army helicopters were that we moved stuff around with. I brought him with me, and he was a total asset to getting that done. I mean, he was looking at things that I didn't quite see, helping me write scopes. We basically built a 2-man general contracting outfit in the matter of the 3-4 weeks we were doing that.
Yeah, and this is all because of your civilian professions, right? Nothing to do with your military MOS or anything.
That's right. Logistics was a part.
Yeah.
You have to know contracting. I had the credit card, I had the cash and everything to do our buys with. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's really the civilian side is what actually made us effective. The Marine Corps is not going to teach you how to go out and do pre-con. They're not.
Right.
They're not going to teach you how to look at we had to basically redo all the AC in this place and upgrade the AC. Well, yeah, sure, we can go out and buy AC units all we want, but they're not going to teach you to go look at the transformer, do a quick calculation, and realize that you need to upgrade the transformer so you can actually power these things, which is something we included in the scope. So, yeah, you're not going to learn that. Wear a green suit.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, it's also really cool that you kind of took that initiative and did something with it. So yeah, really, really cool story, really neat. On the logistics side, I'm kind of curious if, when I hear the word logistics, I think of like everything in the world, right? Everything in the world has logistics behind it. Like, how do you get your desk into your office, right? How do you food on your table, etc. So as it relates to kind of your specific role, it sounded like on this deployment, it was specific to munitions in general. Is that kind of like how you were trained, or how did that translate?
So I was doing a lot of supply officer stuff. So the way the Marine Corps does it is they divide up logistics and supply officers. Supply officers are basically accountants and purchasing agents, and they manage procurement. They supply officers directly translatable to a supply chain officer. Logistics is more on the okay, cool, we got the stuff. How do we get it there? Is how I would kind of bifurcate those two. I was there kind of doing both.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, neat, awesome. So it sounded like you got to the end of that deployment via working on that Honduras air base.
Yeah, right. It was a Guatemala air base. Oh yeah, so yeah, we're based at the air base. We're the team, like the headquarters element, was based in Honduras, and then the air base we actually worked on was up in northern Guatemala, near a town called Flores. It's like it's a cool little spot. If you get a chance to go backpacking, you want to go somewhere cool, go check out Flores, Guatemala.
Awesome.
But actually, so we're there in Honduras. Funny story I wanted to tell you. You being former IDF. First day we fly into the airport in Honduras, and I get out and I saw a Tavor for the first time. The Honduran army was carrying Tavors at the airport. I had no idea, man. I thought that was a freaking space laser. I didn't know what to think of it.
Yeah.
And
it looks like that.
So oh, it totally does. Like, what is that thing? Actually, funny enough, the Guatemalans we were training, they had Galils. I remember they're probably left over from Iran Contra at some point, but yeah, the Guatemalans were rocking Galils. And kind of a funny story there is I sent them the wrong ammo. I guess the Galil, the old school Galil, takes a different grain round than say like a modern M4. And I screwed up and I sent them the wrong ammo. I got in trouble. I fixed it really quickly. Luckily, I built good relationships with the Army. And I said, hey, guys, I know you just sent stuff to Guatemala. I need a bird spun up real fast. And I was cool with the chief warrant officer. He's like, yeah, man, no problem. We'll help you out. So, yeah, man, we're working with Israeli weapons. It was fun and to learn a little bit.
That's wild. Yeah, that's pretty random. I didn't know those weapon systems made it down there. So yeah, that's news to me.
They did. Well, and it's funny because on pre-deployment training, we went through a foreign weapons shoot, and but it was all Soviet bloc weapons. And we get down there, and none of them are using Soviet bloc weapons. So we had to figure that out. I mean, it was all old M4s, M16s, Galils. Shoot, man, El Salvador had M60s. We don't shoot M60s anymore. They had M60s,
right?
And old car 15s, like the old short M4. But which, yeah. So anyways, that's quick tangent there. Yeah, about first impression.
Sure, yeah.
Whereas thought I saw a space laser, but it was actually a Tavor.
That's funny. Yeah, that's wild. Awesome. So it sounds like end of this enlistment or deployment rather. What happens next?
So I was dating my wife at the time, and we basically were having a decision to make. Like, looks like I'm going back to the data center in Northeast Oklahoma. They're building. So we were going to have to make a decision, what that looked like. And I was demobilizing. I get a phone call from my general superintendent, who's still a longtime friend of mine. I'm not working at that company anymore, but still just one of the best human beings you ever want to meet. He gives me a call, says, "Hey, man, I got a job for you in Fort Worth. Are you interested?" My wife was living in Fort Worth at the time. She bought a house while I was deployed. I was like, "Oh yeah, maybe I'll think about it." But really inside, I'm like, "Hell yeah, let's go!" Like, I want to. Yes, okay, like that is an answered prayer. And so it turned into a great opportunity. I come back, demobilize. I had about a month and a half. So the way it works when you demobilize out of the reserves, by law, you get 90 days to report back to work. If you've been gone for a certain amount of time, I think it's 6 months. You've been gone for 6 months or longer, you get 90 days before you have to report back to work. So I didn't take 90. I mean, I probably took 45 days. And, I during that time while I was in transition, I switched reserve units, came back to Fort Worth, got a house, went on a big road trip up through the West Coast. I drove a car from Fort Worth all the way to Seattle, Washington, which is where my new unit was. As I was 6 ANGLICO up in Seattle, took some decompression time, and then went headfirst into building a ground up greenfield data center, first building as a part of that campus, and got right back to work in a big way really quickly. So yeah, I mean, I'd say that's really where my data center journey kind of took off, and got a lot of great experience working on that job. But yeah, I mean, you go from, taking off the green suit to 45 days later, putting on a hard hat and a safety vest, and going back to it.
Sure. Yeah. So was this, I guess, new rotation of reserve duty the same or similar?
This was a little different. So I was looking at, I went to the new unit I got into, was 6 ANGLICO, Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Company. And I went up there to be in their S4 shop, because at the time I was like coming off deployment. I was all gung ho Marine Corps, like, yeah, maybe I want to go full active, maybe I want to go active duty or do this more. And, that's a whole emotional deal you play with, right? Like, you go through highs and lows in any career, but you come off, mobilization like I did, where it felt like I did really good work, had a lot of fun doing it. It's like, man, maybe I want to do this forever now. I didn't really get a chance coming out of training. Maybe this is for me full time. So I went to that unit up there with the intent to lat move over to be an artillery officer and get in the JTAC pipeline. So go be I don't know if the JTAC translates, or if that, I'm sure all U.S. mil will understand that. But yeah, let's go and see about transitioning to a JTAC. And did that for 2 years, and ultimately decided probably not for me. Probably going to stick with reserve side and move my construction career forward. Just because looking at it, I think I have to look 20, 30 years down the road, and I was already kind of on a trajectory where I could set up, be in a much better spot if I just stuck within the profession I was in and keep doing the reserve thing. Because I loved it and I love the people I was doing it with.
Yeah. I think what you said is really important to highlight, because I think it's so true in terms of playing with like these ups and downs. And they're like these huge emotion swings essentially, because it kind of like what you said earlier in terms of like playing that line back and forth. It's really kind of your identity that sticks with you for forever. That is being, service in uniform. So it's really tough to kind of make that decision, especially if you're, playing both lines like you were. So yeah, it's really interesting and good thing to highlight, good thing to note. So going through this kind of, through this kind of like
sorry, I just kind of to tag on what you're saying, like hard days on the job site. Yeah, sorry, like hard days on the job site where you're up at 2 a.m. to go pour concrete, and your trades aren't doing what you want them to do. You're just frustrated as hell, and you kind of go in a low, maybe a low spot. Oh, dude, the grass looks really green over there, man. And fighting that urge to I'll go deploy again. Like things get hard, like I'll go deploy, and kind of playing that line and keeping the long-term vision really clear is hard to do. I was lucky that I was able to do it, but I saw a lot of people on the reserve side who would do that. They go back to the civilian side and say, this is crap, and they go to the Marine Corps or go back to the reserve, go back on active duty orders and say, this isn't for me, and they just kind of ping pong and not really get anywhere. So I think for me it was a pivotal moment to pick a path, choose it, run with it.
Agreed. Yeah. That's. I mean, regardless of which path you choose, I 100% agree that that's the way to do it. Is you got to pick one and just stick with it, because of course there's going to be ups and downs regardless of which path you're on. So going, I guess, through now this new unit that you're attached to in Seattle, it sounded like. Walk us through kind of what that rotation cycle looked like for you.
Yeah. So that was tough, and that was a kick in the butt. So ANGLICO is a unique unit in the sense that every billet is a jump billet. So every billet, if you're not airborne already, you need to go to airborne school at some point. And you have to jump quite frequently to maintain currency, so you can go do exercises, go do deployments, and all that thing. So operationally, really intensive, while maintaining the same level of administrative intensity the rest of the reserve has to abide by. So you have to step it up a notch. And I was doing two, I think, pretty hard things. I was a superintendent, senior field engineer, superintendent, which I got promoted to superintendent a little later. But basically the superintendent on this data center job, which data center projects are notorious for being really demanding, a lot of hours, tough, complex, tight timelines. Like your delivery date does not shift. Don't care how much weather you get, whatever it is, your delivery date does not change. And then while simultaneously being a primary staff member at a battalion level command that has to train and has to go, while, also, staying married, right? Like being married at home, being a good husband, right? Like, so that was a lot. And, I would get on a plane. We would drill every month or every other month. So a lot of times what that unit would do was, instead of Saturday, Sunday drills, we would drill Thursday through Sunday, because, coordinating air to do airborne operations and stuff takes time on a reserve weekend. It's hard. Like, if you have bad weather, you're not jumping. So you need a day of slack so you can actually hit that wicket. And so, I would get on a plane on Wednesday night from DFW, fly to Seattle, get to my hotel room about midnight, wake up about 5, go drill till 6, 7 o'clock. Thursday, we went to the field every drill pretty much. There was very few times that we just stayed in the office unless we were doing medical or something. So yeah, you get out, get the unit about 5 o'clock, get the trucks ready, go to the field, sleep on the ground for 3 days, pack it all up in a hurry, get back and try to get back in time for your flight. I always took a midnight flight on Sunday. So I would basically walk off the plane on Sunday morning about 5 a.m. local here, and maybe catch an hour or two of sleep and be right back on the job site. So that was life for pretty much the whole time I was on the data center.
Yeah, wow, that is extremely intense. Really, really tough to accomplish. How long of a period was that?
About 2
approximately?
years. Yeah,
2 years.
I was at ANGLICO for 2 years, and then from there I switched over to company command. But yeah, that was it, and that was a beatdown. People talk about burnout. People talk about managing work-life balance. Whatever. Looking back, about a year and a half in, I was burnt out. You look at like short fuse. You had, and not thinking clearly, at times, just trying to get through.
Mhm.
I think you have to get to that point to realize what it is. You can hear people talk about it, but I was burnt out at about a year and a half in to be building that data center. And then by the time you hit burnout, you're hitting the hardest part of the job, which is finishing and completing it, right? You talk about schedule compression. We were already compressed, and construction schedules naturally, load to the right side as far as work density goes. And it was hitting both those things kind of at the same time. Yeah. My wife was great.
Yeah, that's
I would come home and just be a wreck basically, and she supported me through it. And this was not all me. She had a lot to do with me being able to do this.
Yeah, amazing. Glad to hear that. That's awesome. I want to highlight what you said in terms of that short fuse. I think that's a really great way to kind of highlight, distinguish when you're at kind of a burnout, or even if you don't want to define it as burnout, you just something you gotta look at something that's happening in your life ecosystem if you see yourself on that kind of short fuse. And I think that's probably relatively prevalent with veterans. So it's a good thing to note. How did these transitions between your command, your position occur? Was it just a time interval, or was there something else involved?
So on the reserve side in the Marine Corps, and I can't speak to other services. I'm not exactly sure, but on the Marine Corps, you have to be the champion of your own career. If you want to go to a unit, you basically have to apply on the officer side. You have to apply. They have to give you the job. And as far as your career progression goes, on active duty, somebody is there telling you, okay, you're getting these orders next, or you need to go to this school next, or you kind of have a little more guidance in where in structure to your career. On the reserve side, it's up to you. You have to make that up, and which is liberating to a sense, and you could pick your assignments, but it's also tough because you basically have to sell yourself to the next unit you want to go to. And so usually 2 to 3 years is a good interval to be anywhere. If you stay longer than 3 years, people start looking at you like, I think you're just camping out. Things must be really easy there. So for me, I did just about every rotation I did was right at the 2-year mark. So it was right at the 2-year mark. I did 1 year as an officer in charge of a maintenance detachment, but that was broken by the deployment. And on the deployment, I just where I reached out to go to ANGLICO, and that's why that transition happened. But yeah, you basically have to be the captain of your own fate on the reserve side because no one is managing it for you, and it's all based on your reputation. If you're good, cool. You can pretty much go where you want to go. If not, I'll have a harder time.
And how are you identifying these kind of next, areas that you'd want to go?
You look at, I think you hear things, you talk to people, you go to, you'll go to a conference and you'll hear about different units. You'll also loosely model it after what active duty career progression. So, that kind of towards the tail end of your captain time, you probably want to pick up company command if you want to go further on, see that you have command on your resume. So I knew I wanted to be a company commander. I remember looking as a platoon commander, looking up to my company commander, thinking he was almighty God, which obviously he wasn't. He was like 4 years older than me. I don't know why, but you're a brand new, bright-eyed, lieutenant. Like, oh man, that guy's got it figured out, right? And so I knew I wanted to do that. Yeah, and then lo and behold, I get to being a company commander, and I'm like, I don't have anything figured out. I'm just going to act like I do, and away we go. Right? That's it.
Such it is. It's just the way that it is for sure. So I think this brings us to kind of your last role.
Yeah, on the reserve side, you mean? Yeah, last role on the reserve side was company command.
Yeah.
So the the headquarters. So I was at 6th ANGLICO, and they were co-located in the same reserve center as Combat Logistics Battalion 23. So there's, we kind of knew the CLB 23 guys a little bit. I was getting towards the end of my time at 6th, and a friend of mine reached out, a guy who I'd met on an exercise, and we had helped each other out. We were in 21 Palms on this kind of, butt kicker of an exercise. And I had helped him out with some stuff, and he helped me out with some stuff, and we developed a pretty good relationship. And he called me and said, "Hey, man, I'm rotating out as company commander here. Do you want to come take over Transportation Services Company in California?" I was like, "Yeah, that sounds like a great opportunity. It's perfect timing. It's a unit that I want to take over. It's something I'm interested in, and let's talk about it." So I went through, interviewed with the battalion executive officer, with battalion commanding officer, and he said, "Yeah, come on." So, and that I went and did company command time for 2 years.
So yeah, that's awesome. Walk us through kind of, what that cycle was like for you.
Yeah, man. So it's company commander reserve, like you're an administrator basically. Like my MOS was logistics officer, but the reality is I'm actually an admin officer now, I would say. Just by the nature of the work that I was doing day in and day out. Managing, body composition program and problem children, and making sure all of our annual training's in place, and all that. Basically, if I had to loosely translate a company commander, it'd be like a project manager, I would say, if I like loosely translate it to the construction world. You have metrics you need to meet. You have to put people in the right places. You have to look at procurements. Like if we're going to an exercise, I need to start looking at what gear and equipment we have 8 months out, because it takes us 2 months to identify what we need. And then it takes us 6 months to procurement, from hitting purchase to getting approval to actually deliver there at the unit. Right. So, you have to look at things like that. Day to day, and a lot of time, I spent most of the time on the phone with my first sergeant. And through that, my first sergeant probably became one of my best friends. He'll be a lifelong friend going on in the future. He was a reserve. No, he wasn't a reserve. He was a Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputy. And so, talking about reservists bringing skill sets, as the first sergeant, you're basically HR. I would say a lot of similarity to HR on the civilian side, and he could interview a Marine who's having problems and understand what was going on exactly and give them a path forward to fix it. Because his superpower was that he was also a career reservist. So he's been a Lance Corporal in the reserves, and he's been a sergeant. He's been every level in the reserves, and so he knows what it's like to balance career and reserve life, while at the same time he's got a huge level of EQ from just his job as a deputy. So he knows problems. He can sniff out the problem children really quickly and get ahead of it before they come into the unit and become cancer. You can get them out. So day to day was mostly spending time talking to him. Spent a lot of time talking to so you have active duty counterparts. And this is something I learned on the civilian side that really helped me on the reserve side, was the importance of relationships with your counterparts, with your peers, and the ability to, influence and shape a situation just based on a willingness to listen to somebody else and come in as a team player. So, we have every reserve unit has an active duty counterpart, and there's basically a core staff of maybe 10 people. There's a captain who leads it, and there's, he has a first sergeant, and then he's got, motor T and supply and logistics and, kind of everything just to keep the lights on while the reservists aren't there. Well, I learned pretty quickly that I need to make that guy my best friend. And to this day, because, right, they do all the work while we're gone. And if we come in expecting them to basically, do everything and, just start throwing tomatoes at each other because, these trucks aren't ready, or, where's our stuff for this, or, that exercise didn't go well and it's all your fault. which happens a lot. It's kind of the ugly truth, is that the reserve and inspector instructor relationship, which that's what the active duty folks are called, inspector instructor, or INI. If the reserve INI relationship is not good, there's problems all the way down the line, and it's not a fun place to come drill. It's no fun. So, for me, I realized that pretty quickly, because I'd seen bad INI relationships before, and so I made it a point to make it a good one. So, yeah, Will, if you're out there listening to this at any point, man, love you. I hope he gets it. I'll probably send him a link later, but I think that was a big part of the fight as a company commander, was maintaining that relationship between reserves and the INI, and maintaining a good relationship with the first sergeant, and generally keeping the BS that came down from on high away from my guys. There's, I don't know. I mean, everybody kind of grumbles. Oh, headquarters doesn't know what they're doing. They're making us do all this stupid stuff, whatever, right? And a lot of times it is stupid. Sir, if you're listening, you know what I'm saying. I hope all battalion commanders. I love him. No, he and I actually still talk. I love him. He did a good job to keep a lot of stuff away from us. But I mean, it's just the nature of the beast, right? It's crap rolls downhill. And so keeping a lot of that away from us was also another part of my job.
For sure. Yeah. That's very understood, very understandable. So also, I guess what came to mind was what were like re-enlistment cycles, or was this all within like one enlistment that you had?
On the officer side, you're commissioned as long as you want to be a part. So, and that's like for life. You're either an officer or retired in active status, reserve status, or retired status, and you can stay there as long as you want. So yeah, I was. I just kept my reserve status and my reserve officer status going until I eventually just hung it up after 9 years.
Yeah. So walk us through that kind of. I think that's kind of where we just got to, right? Is when you're ready to retire. Yeah. So walk us through that headspace and how that process happened.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of it was driven by knowing that I wanted to go do more and I wanted to go advance my education. I think it was all kind of pivoted around wanting to go back to grad school. I identified pretty quickly that I wanted to go back and get a master's, and specifically within supply chain, something in supply chain management. I toyed around with MBA a little bit. This is going to sound really bad, but I think MBA has become kind of a really generic term. There's a lot of people out there who are like, yeah, I'm MBA. Well, like, really? Like, did it make you any better? I don't know. So for me, I was like, I want to study something kind of more hard science. I wasn't smart enough to get into a top 20 MBA school. I tried. I took GMAT, didn't quite get there, but I could get into a pretty decent supply chain graduate program at Texas Christian here in Fort Worth. So a lot of things came together there. So I got accepted to grad school, and I basically knew that I could do two things at once, and so but I couldn't do three. I couldn't do reserves. I couldn't do full-time job, and I couldn't do grad school all at once. Like that, I couldn't do data center superintendent, reserves, and grad school all at once. So this is backing up just a little bit, because and also be a good dad and husband. So to back it up a little bit, at that time, kind of as I was looking towards the next thing, I knew I wanted to go to grad school. Being in the reserves while you're in grad school is a really good option, because you maintain your health insurance. It's the cheapest, best health insurance in the world, bar none. Can support my family with it. So I basically elected to drop being a superintendent, do grad school and reserves. And I knew kind of at the end of grad school, I was probably going to say, adios to the reserves, and use that grad school period to transition and find the next role that I was excited about. And so that's how it went. And I graduated grad school, and then finished company command time, and basically didn't have much passion to keep going within the reserves, and then transitioned into working in construction tech for a while. But yeah, basically what it looked like. I kind of knew company command was going to be the last deal because I needed to focus on that civilian career and look, 10, 20, 30 years down the road.
Yeah. Very logical way that you kind of set that up. And I would agree that you couldn't somehow magically also add grad school to that list of things you're tackling. So
No,
totally with you there.
no.
So when you finally, I guess it sounds like you're both graduating grad school and you're also concluding your reserve duty enlistment, or reserve duty, just generally speaking.
Yeah.
What is that period like for you now that you're kind of just shifting fully onto civilian life?
Yeah. So fortunately, and this is a great military connection. Another reason I absolutely love the small world that is the Marine Corps. Fortunately, when I left full-time superintendent, I was able to consult on a pretty steady basis for a construction tech firm while I was in grad school. It was like 4 hours a day at first, so I was able to, kind of keep a paycheck going and do grad school and do reserves. I did that for about 2 years straight. So I already kind of had some momentum in contact, and it worked with kind of my goals were at that time. And so when I graduated, or right before I graduated, they reached out and said, "Hey, we actually want to bring you on full time and as a product manager." And I was like, "All right, I'll go be a product manager. Let's do this." And so that transition for me wasn't hard. I didn't graduate and then say, "Okay, crap, now what?" I already kind of had something set up and worked. But to go back to the military connection, when a good friend of mine who was a sales guy at the software company found out I was leaving, he immediately reached out and said, "Hey, I want you to come work with us." He's a former Marine Corps gunnery sergeant, EOD guy turned career recruiter, absolute sales pro, great human being, love him to death. We still talk to this day, just as friends. He brought me over, so that Marine Corps network helped me make that kind of transition. And I just eternally grateful for a friend reaching out and saying, "Hey, we could use you for a little bit. Just come on part time for a while," and then it transitioned full time, and got a lot of great experience that I'm still used to this day.
That's awesome. That's really cool to hear in terms of the connection within the Marine Corps, and then also just you being able to maneuver all of those moving pieces all at once consistently. Pretty awesome in hindsight to kind of look at and just hear from my perspective. So kind of taking all of that you went through, doing the reserve to civilian profession, to school, to reserve, to now, transitioning into fully civilian profession. I want to use kind of like this period, or right now as like a plug of hindsight advice. In all of that circumstance, any hindsight advice you could look at, from your own story, hopefully other veterans can hear and apply to their stories, of how to go through that transition period, easier, simpler, advice in general. Any thoughts on that?
Take more time than you think you need to decompress. And don't, if you're on a financial treadmill, get off it as fast as you can, because that gives you freedom to take that decompression time, which in reality is an investment for you much further down the road, delayed gratification. So, and I'll give you some really practical advice here too. Like if you're a new JMO, junior military officer coming off, and you screwed up and got yourself a big payment on that flashy new truck, freaking sell it. Buy something that you don't have a payment on that's reliable, because that thing, whatever you're paying into, is going to close so many doors for you. Be willing to be poor. Like, be willing to, couch surf for a while. Be willing to, hell, at one point I was willing to go work at Home Depot when I wasn't sure if like this consulting thing was going to work. I was like, fine, like I'll go work part time, or I'll go ride horses or something. I don't know, man. Like, be willing to do without. But I think the most important thing you can do for your long term success is to decompress a little bit and don't chase a dollar figure on your salary. Especially at first on that transition, like chase the experience at first, because the industry sees you, whether you like it or not, is if you're like a 4-year term and then you come out in the civilian world, even though you have 4 years of experience, the industry still sees you as a new hire straight out of college or straight out of trade school.
Yeah.
They see you as square one. Obviously, with the right attitude and the right skill sets, you'll advance much more quickly. But understand that and look at yourself through that lens.
Yeah, that's 100% agree, and that kind of touches on what we were talking about in the beginning of the show, which is you gotta, like be able to humble yourself. You gotta realize that I like to bring up the analogy of switching professions within civilian space to kind of, I find it to just make it a little bit an easier thing to accept, right? Like going from accounting to marketing, or from sales to computer engineering, whatever it is, right? You would have to really humble yourself and start again. And then as you progress, you can leverage your skill set from past experience, i.e. being a veteran, to excel forward. So yeah, totally agree with that advice. I think it's great advice. So moving forward, sounds like you transitioned from the the construction tech startup, to where you're at today, or is there another role in between?
Man, I went out and started consulting on my own. So at kind of towards the end, I knew too, with going to grad school, the entrepreneur thing kind of excited me. And at the end, of that 3 years I was working in contact, I started getting demand signals from all over. Hey, come work with us. Come be a product manager for us. Come help me start up this modular building thing. And a lot of those were opportunities I was really excited about doing. And so I said, you know what, let's take a chance. Let's bet on yourself and take a chance, and trade some security for opportunity and go for it. And so went out on my own, started my own, I call it consulting firm. I was really just a freelancer, man. I wish I could say, I had this cool prestigious consulting firm, but it was just me and one other guy. But I went out. My first client was a modular home builder up in Oklahoma, and during grad school, I got really excited about modular and offsite construction. From my experience being a superintendent, seeing it made so much sense to me. And so I got, it's random. This is also a Marine Corps network thing too. The guy who called me is a retired Marine colonel who's a developer up in Oklahoma, and he saw the same thing I saw in modular. And he started building houses in a factory, shipping them to the job site, setting them in place, not completely fully assembled, but pretty damn near close. And so he called me out of the blue and said, "Hey man, I'm looking for a general manager. I want you to move to Oklahoma City and come be my GM." I was like, "I would love to, but I've got kids here. I'm based here in Fort Worth, but here, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll come set conditions for you to have a GM ramp much more quickly than the whatever year it's going to take for him to get processes, whatever in place." So I went out there to set up a safety program, set up an S&OP process, basically set up a supply chain, ordering all this tech stuff, made it as good as I could, so a GM could come in from somewhere and be much more effective, much more quickly. So that was a client, worked for while simultaneously took on a product manager role, as a field product manager for a software startup. Took on some marketing stuff. I mean, I was just kind of hopping all over, and I took on last planner training. So lean construction. I don't know if I'm sure some people out here will know how to do it. But one thing that translates really well from the military to construction is structured planning and communication. And when I first got introduced to lean construction practices, it made so much sense to me. It blew my mind. And I started implementing them in my role as a superintendent, got pretty good at it, had some really good success with it. And I started getting people to call me, say, "Hey, come train our superintendents, come out to this data center, come help us." So it got to a point where I needed help, and I hired a guy, former Army Special Forces guy, knew nothing about construction, even though he was an 18 Charlie, which is a Special Forces engineer sergeant, knew nothing about commercial construction. But he had a good attitude. He knew how to build rapport with people. He knew how to instruct. So I flew him out, flew out another Special Forces guy who's working in lead construction now. And I had a bunch of my friends, my superintendent friends, come in as role players. And we did a weekend training session to get this guy spun up so he could go on to job sites and actually help implement lean construction. So, did that for a year and a half, and things are going great. Loved it. But saw an opportunity with the company I'm at now, reached out on a cold DM through LinkedIn, got the job, and I'm in there for about 4 weeks. I'll tell you more about that later. But yeah, that's so like post software, I just got demand to come out and do things that I was excited about doing. And so I just traded security for opportunity and chased it down.
Yeah, well, that's awesome, man. I love to hear that kind of trajectory in terms of how you got there and how you were bouncing around. I mean, true entrepreneurial attitude, right, and attack on the industry in that regard. So yeah, I mean, talk to us about where you're at today and what you're doing on the modular side, and I'll also just plug in. I 100% agree with modular, and like your thoughts on modular. I also agree. I think that's like the true way of advancing what we're doing. At a minimum, at a small scale, right? At a minimum on like that single family type of scale, I'd love to see that continue growing and really been a force to, drive home availability.
Yeah. There's definitely a play there, especially in, affordable housing. That is absolutely a play to do that. I think it's viable. But, and I'll hit on that, I'll riff on that a little bit, and I'll kind of talk about where I'm at now for the affordable housing space. And really modular. I mean, there's all kinds of, case studies about companies who have started up and failed. You talk about Katera, Vigo is another one. Start up and fail. From what I've seen in modular, for it to be successful, the affordable housing space makes a lot of sense because you can productionalize it. I mean, we've been building trailer houses. And I grew up in Oklahoma. There's trailer houses everywhere. We've been building those forever, and people can afford them to live on them. But you make something a little more robust. When a tornado comes, living in Oklahoma, that's a problem. Yeah. You build something a little more robust, but the thing that will make modular work at mass scale is standardization. And so it takes a Henry Ford approach to do it. And when I say Henry Ford approach, right, Henry Ford's deal was you can have any color as long as it's black, right? And the guy I was working up with in Oklahoma, his approach was you can have any floor plan as long as it's this one. There's no architects getting in, well, what if we move a wall here? What if we do a deal there? Because modular only works if the production line just hums and churns it out. If there's enough demand out in the field and there's enough, you establish a good tact in the facility, it only works if it hums along like a machine. So any little disruption, interruption has ripple effects and significant ones at that. So it is viable, but it takes a Henry Ford kind of approach to it. And also, I would argue a vertically integrated approach from a developer standpoint, where the developer, the general contractor, and the factory are all under the same roof. And even parts of the supply chain, specifically lumber. If you vertically integrate your lumber supply chain, it makes it a lot. It pencils a lot better that way too. So, that's my kind of tangent on modular housing. But where I am with modular construction, specifically in the data center space, now I work for a company called Modular Power Solutions. We are a sister company to Rosendin Electric under Rosendin Holdings. And if you're not familiar with Rosendin Electric, I think we're the number 3 electrical contractor in the U.S. A pretty big presence in the data center space. And, there's what we figured out about, 10 years ago or so, is that if you take your electrical power distribution components inside the data center, inside the electrical building in a data center, and take construction activities off the job site, move them back into the supply chain, you can accelerate schedule. And for these data center owners and developers, schedule is everything. You have safety, you have quality, cost, schedule, kind of those 3 buckets. Well, in the data center space, cost is less important, whereas schedule is paramount. So there's opportunity there to move those activities back into the supply chain, prefab these electrical skids in the factory, ship them to the job site, basically ready to energize and then go through commissioning. So working there now, really excited about it. Some really smart, cool, humble, hardworking people there at Modular Power Solutions. I've been there, gosh, this was the end of week 3, and it's been nothing but impressed with everybody I met. Yeah, it's still pretty fresh. I'm still, diving through contracts, understanding the business side, understanding the people, but just been nothing but impressed with what we're doing. And,
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I guess what I am starting to understand, generally speaking, in modular, on the commercial side of things, like in your example, data centers, components are like what becomes effective, cost effective, schedule effective in commercial construction. Is that like the case, generally speaking?
I'd say, like you mean components from, maybe walk me through that question again.
Yeah, sure. So I guess by components, I mean, like you're providing, electrical, I'm looking at the right terminology here.
Yeah.
Integrators.
Integrating electrical. Yes. Integrators. That's it.
Right.
That's it. So
integrators versus, for example, like a single family home in its entirety, right? Versus the data center in its entirety. So that's what I mean by components of a commercial job.
Yeah. So, and it kind of painted better context. We're not modularizing the exterior of the building, really, right? We're not just stacking a data center like Legos, and then all of a sudden it's there, right? It's simply the electrical components, because from what I've seen is, and then the electrical components specifically, primarily what we do are within your power distribution within a data center. They all have to be redundant. And so every data center will have utility power in, and it'll have some form of backup power, most of the time generator power coming in. And let's say utility power dies, you have to switch from utility to generator power. Well, that takes a second. So you have something else called a UPS, or an uninterruptible power supply. And so that the UPS, the battery pack, basically will take the load until that generator can completely get spun up, get leveled out, and then take the data center load. And all that happens within your main switchboard. So what MPS primarily does is basically provides that MSB UPS package, where it delivers it to the job site in a condition that's already quality control checked as far as your electrical terminations go on the gear itself and at the UPS. It's already gone through, it varies a little bit project by project, but it's already gone through energization testing. So that way, when you get out there to the project, you don't have to have people crawling all over each other to go do that testing. And really too, I think from what I've seen in the data center space, the contractors who can build these things really well and are successful are, anybody can build a big, ugly gray box that's got power to it, right? The hard thing is getting all of the electrical and mechanical systems to work together through that commissioning process. So what I've seen in the year and a half I've been traveling to data centers, and from my own experience working on them, is that the contractors who can get through commissioning the best are the ones who are going to outshine the others going forward. So a lot of the value prop within that modularized electrical approach is we take a lot of those activities, a lot of those commissioning activities off the job site, remove variance from them, and then deliver it much further down the line. So it sets it up to where people can, more people can build these things much more quickly. You don't have to worry about it, I think. So does that make sense? Does that answer your question as far as
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I mean, all of what you said, I mean, at least to me and my brain, it explains why modular, again, at least at a component level, makes 100% sense and could really create efficiency gains and cost gains, schedule gains, all QA/QC gains, all across the board, right? In commercial construction. So that's awesome, man. We're definitely rooting for you guys, and excited to see you grow in the data center. Hopefully we'll see your guys' sticker somewhere here in the St. Louis area. That'd be cool.
Absolutely.
Closing out the professional side. I know you've been kind of like mentioning it throughout the conversation, but I want to plug translatable skills, military to civilian profession, and think of it also as a means of kind of advice for veterans in terms of how they can translate right on their resume and on interviews and such.
Yeah. As far as the skill translation goes, there are a lot of skills and processes that do apply. The trick is applying them in a way that your civilian counterparts can understand. So, for example, right now I'm working on a business process initiative at MPS, and I am using the Marine Corps planning process to do that. I am not calling it the Marine Corps planning process. I am rewording a lot of those phases in there to translate much better. So nobody, because as soon as you say, well, this is how we did it in the Marine Corps, like I'm done. Write that guy off. Oh, thank you for your service. Now get out of here. Right. That's kind of what you'll get. So there are processes that apply. Use them in a way that actually translates and think it and do some real thinking about it before you actually go try to implement. I would say the biggest one to take away is EQ. Learn EQ, right? You can't knife hand people. And it's not that the civilian side's soft. It's not. I mean, there are some hard-working, tough people over here, just as many as there are wearing green suits. I think the military honestly puffs itself up to, we're this big, bad, tough deal. I mean, yeah, sure. Special ops, whatever. Yeah, those are scary human beings. But by and large, like me, I was a very normal guy, had a very vanilla, not exciting career in the military, right? Like, there's no reason for us to assume that we're, tougher or cooler, they could take it, emotions and stuff. None of that crap. Like EQ, and I noticed this too, people who move up quickly in the Marine Corps military have a high level of EQ, and that same thing translates over to the civilian side. So listen more than you talk. Honestly, I feel a little awkward because I've been talking so much on this podcast, but you're a good interviewer, man. But I would say, man, listen more than you talk. Genuinely try to make connections with people, even if on the military side, you would initially look at them and say, all right, that person doesn't add much value, whatever, right? Like, be genuine and intentional in learning about people and understanding them. Make a decision. I'm not saying you have to be everybody's friend. Definitely don't be buddy. And definitely don't expect people to roll out the red carpet for you just because you wear a green suit at one time. You still have to uphold the standard of the organization from which you came. It's something you still earn every day, even if you don't put rank on your collar.
Yeah, well said. It's all about taking the fundamentals and translating it into whatever it means in the civilian profession. So it's exactly as you said it, right? Just learn how you can translate, that playbook into civilian words so that you can carry it forward. Yeah, well said. And again, you mentioned many translatable skills as we were going through the conversation. So that was just a specific plug moment. Awesome. And before we close out, anything I missed? Anything you want to add?
No. I just want to say thank you to really all my friends, my mentors throughout the Marine Corps and on the civilian side. I have not had a straight path by any means, and I've probably listening to this, you're probably like, God, that guy's all over the place. But it's been a lot of fun along the way, and I couldn't have done the things that I wanted to do without really good people helping me do just that. So I want to say thank you to all of them if you're listening. I hope you are. And then lastly, be willing to trade security for opportunity.
Yeah. Well said. And by the way, for whatever it's worth, me listening to your story, I do think it sounds calculated. I don't think anything, unless you have a lot of luck on your side and things just really roll from one thing to the next. Luckily, from my perspective, it sounds like you had a lot of logical calculated thoughts in how you went from one stage to the other. So just to give yourself a little bit more credit, from my perspective, at least, take it or leave it.
I appreciate
Before we close,
long
sure.
drives to and from drill. Long drives to and from drill. You have time to think.
Yeah, there you go. All right, awesome. So last two questions before we end the show is, what's your wellness practice look like?
Yeah, so morning, get up, go work out, maybe 30, 45 minutes. Try not to eat junk. I mean, I grew up, eating out of paper bags, basically, on the road a lot, but, try to eat good. One thing that really helped me about 4 years ago, I got into Jiu Jitsu. That really helped me from just, physically, emotionally, mentally. You get on the mat with a 130-pound black belt and you're a white belt. I'm a 190-pound white belt, or I'm a blue belt now, but still, like, I get on the mat with a 130-pound black belt, I'm getting choked. Being able to deal with that and put my own ego aside and just calm down, figure out what happened. And then also too, when you're kind of in the heat of a roll or whatever, just slow your mind down, make good decisions. Don't jump for the thing that seems really like it'll work. Kind of calm down, slow down, keep yourself centered. Don't get off balance. Go that way. Speaking of balance, I want to do a judo is next on the list. It looks really cool. I think you translate pretty well to BJJ. So I know IDF is big in judo. So maybe we get together, you teach me some things. But I say BJJ has been a big help. Getting out with my friends, talking. Like I mentioned, that group chat with, my good buddies from the Marine Corps, staying in touch with them. And I'll compete in biathlon races, which is like a 2-gun biathlon. So there's a group of guys, we get together and we'll go on a big ranch somewhere and we'll run 8-9 miles and have shooting stages at each deal. And, a lot of veterans, a former Marine guy, a former Marine Force Recon guy runs it. And, just getting kind of be around Marines again is beneficial. Kind of gives me sanity. So I'd say that. But honestly, I say all those things is like kind of selfishly, but I think first and foremost, being the best husband and father I possibly can be. When I feel like when I'm a good husband and I'm a good dad, everything else kind of works itself out.
Yeah, well said, man. Very well said. Awesome. Last but not least is any book or books you'd like to recommend?
Yeah, I got one. It's right here. It's called The Ugly American. It's, from my perspective, my analysis, it's all about having high level EQ, being able to walk into a strange place, a new situation, and shut up, listen more than you talk, understand a problem, and help people solve it from their perspective with their capabilities. This country is built, it's a fictional country called Sarkeesian, I think something. But one of the big lines here is, you have a Sarkeesian problem, you need a Sarkeesian solution, not just your solution. Don't just impose that. And to do that, you have to really listen and listen well and work with people. Ugly Americans, good story, good book. That one stuck with me for quite a while.
Yeah, really neat. I haven't heard of that one, but it sounds really interesting and something that I think I would very much enjoy. So I'm putting that on my list. I was about to close out, but I forgot. I just remembered that I forgot to ask what it's like working with your dad on the cattle operation. I'm really curious what that's like, what that means.
Oh man, it's something that keeps he and I together. Gives us something to talk about. So I mean, he's not a big time cattle rancher. I mean, he runs about 60 mama cows on 300 acres of grass up in northeast Oklahoma, and
awesome.
He's been doing it for about 20 years now. So he didn't grow up with cattle, but high school we had him and everything, and so. I've partnered with him. I've got about 10% of the herd, and it gives us something to talk about, something to connect on. It's a lot of fun. It's cool. I mean, we just shipped 2 trailers of calves up to the sale yesterday, the day before. And, he was on the way home. He called me all proud, like, oh man, it feels so good. All that year, that year's worth of work, we just shipped them off. And, being really proud of that product that he's putting out. I mean, he puts a lot of time into making sure he's got good grass, put a lot of time into making sure his cattle are healthy, and being a really good steward of the land. And it's fun to just go up there and drive around with him and look at all the, and just look at sort of how far we've come, and be proud of the work we've done. So yeah, it's a connecting file between my old man and I. He's got some years left doing it, and it's something that I want my kids to. Yeah, if they want to do it full time, great. They can go off somewhere and do it full time, or if they just want to have an understanding and be a part of it, they can. So, yeah, that's the whole deal. Not a cowboy by any means. We're not big time ranchers, but we do it and we enjoy it.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. That's really neat, and I think it's just an awesome knowledge base to have. Whether it's part time once in a while or full time, it's just a really cool thing to know how to do and to maintain. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, we're slaughtering. We had a cow we're going to slaughter next week, so come on down. We'll give you some homegrown steaks.
That'd be awesome, man. That'd be awesome. Well, Andrew, thanks so much, man, for taking time to share your story. Really appreciate it. Excited to share it. And again, thanks so much. Excited to see what you build now with these data centers and the modular transformers.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. I appreciate what you're doing for the veteran community, construction community. I've been really excited about doing this with you, so I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. All right, everyone. See you next time.
See you.
Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build.